Hello, everyone. Dave Goulas, Beyond Fulfillment Podcast, back again with a special edition of Trump's impact on the supply chain with my good friend, Jim Tompkins, supply chain expert. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Dave. How are you?
Doing great, doing great. How
Good.
about yourself?
Crazy. Absolutely insane.
Yes,
But I
yes.
think I'm having fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're all very busy these days with all the different moves going on in this time of year. And yeah, in the beginning when we started this, we both weren't sure if there was going to be enough news to make this into a
Mm.
weekly show. And it seems like as the weeks go by, it's just busier and busier and there's more to talk about. So, just in this episode too, stuff that's happened really in the last week that are very important supply chain topics, which we plan to go over the privatization of the post office that could potentially happen, the tariffs on Mexico and Canada that are slotted to go into effect March 4th at this point. Will that or will that not happen? Um, these U.S. is going to levy hefty port fees on Chinese ships now. That's a big issue. Apple making its announcement of this $500 billion investment uh, due to being bullish on American manufacturing and also the tariff issue. That and so much more. So we'll get into all that, but we've had this new administration for just over a month, and we're seeing record speed and things changing so rapidly, and it's a lot to keep up with. But just I want to ask you, Jim, because you've been around supply chain for so long and in business for over 50 years. What's your overall assessment of how Trump is doing thus far?
Well, one thing that's perfectly clear, Dave, is that a crazy amount of work has been done. Um, like you, I work long hours. I work very hard. I don't enjoy sleep that much. And I look at what Trump has done in 39 days. And I tell you what, you and I, working as hard as we could, it would take us 39 months to get that done. And so it's absolutely mind boggling. So the person that has been talking to you to date is the supply chain guy. And he is known as either Dr. Tompkins or James A. Tompkins, PhD. And that guy has written, I don't know, 24 books. If we go way back in time, we can see here's a book called Winning Manufacturing by James A. Tompkins, PhD. And then look at the picture of the stud on the back, what the heck? But that's a supply chain book. It's about manufacturing. There's another supply chain book, probably the one that's the biggest hit, is by James A. Tompkins, PhD, called No Boundaries. This was the first real supply chain book. And then the Bible of supply chain is a supply chain handbook, once again by James A. Tompkins, PhD. Now, what's my point of mentioning that? Well, my point of mentioning that there's this other guy, and this other guy got in bed last night around midnight, and he started thinking about, my goodness sakes, what Trump is doing and how fast it's going. This guy's name is Jim Tompkins. And Jim Tompkins, not Dr. James, but Jim Tompkins doesn't have a PhD in leadership, but he writes leadership's books. Here's what I looked like 10 years ago. The book is Revolution by Jim Tompkins. Jim Tompkins does not have a bachelor's, a master's, or PhD in leadership, but here's a book on leadership and the revolution in industry. Here's a book called Bold Leadership, written by Jim Tompkins, not Dr. James. And here's a book that we just wrote last year called Insightful Leadership by Jim Tompkins. Why is there two of me? Doesn't that confuse people? Well, yeah, it does. But guess what? Jim Tompkins learned leadership by doing it, by making mistakes, by messing up. But Dr. James learned it in the classroom, and then the practitioner came into play. So Dr. James knows supply chain. Jim Tompkins knows leadership. Jim took control of myself last night around midnight, and I didn't sleep well because I was tossing and turning on the subject. What is Trump doing, and where is he going, and how is he getting this all done? I have come up with a hypothesis. I don't know if this is true, but it makes sense and things seem to be falling in line. I believe President Trump began working on being the president 4 years ago. And he set forth a series of objectives. And for that column of objectives, and he probably had around 30 of them, that at least we've seen so far, that he then developed a bunch of options that would be ways of accomplishing those objectives or contributing to the accomplishment of those objectives. And so now he's got these objectives and these options. And what he's doing is he's picking off some of the important ones and he's presenting a couple thoughts on it. Those thoughts are getting bounced around in the press, in the news. He's having press conferences in the Oval Office. He's letting things out on a day by day basis. And then what he's doing, he's saying, okay, Bob, you take care of this topic, and Sue, you take care of this topic. And so Bob gets the topic of China, let's say. And so he's working on the China thing. And that China thing has all sorts of different levels on it. The balance of trade is important. The South China Sea is important. The IP and technology is very important. There's a lot of issues with China. And so he's got a whole long list of those things that are options to be considered. One of those things is rare earth minerals, for example, because China controls rare earth minerals in the world. And so he's got all these different options. And he tells Bob, who's taking care of China, you come and see me tomorrow, and let's talk about the options of what we want to release. And so he then says, okay, let's release option number 16. So they release number 16. And he tells Bob, let's watch how China responds to this. Let's watch how the American public responds. Let's look at how the politicians respond. And then come and see me a day later, and we'll decide what the next option are we're going to pursue. And so he has all these options for all these objectives lined up. And what he's doing is he's now driving the ship and deciding which ones to put in and which ones not to put in. And so all the topics we have talked about to date can be looked at in this context. And so, okay, that's a portion of the China objective. That's a portion of the Ukrainian objective. That's a portion of the Russian objective. That's a portion of the invest in the US objective. That's a part of reducing government spending. That's a part of energy. That's a part of illegal immigration. So we take all these really important objectives, and he has the optionality already in place. And so he is looking at how to best steer this thing, how to negotiate this thing to a conclusion by the timing of his actions based on the reactions he gets. And so there is a big plan here. We're not able to understand it necessarily because we're just seeing it a piece at a time. But I'm starting to see it come together as an overall plan to accomplish his overall objectives. And so it's really cool when you look at it from that perspective because everything starts fitting in a way that makes sense. And these things interact with each other. Trump's interactions with Canada has something to do with rare earth minerals. Trump's interaction with Greenland has something to do with rare earth minerals. Trump's interaction with Ukraine has a lot to do with rare earth minerals. Why is Trump so hung up on these rare earth minerals? Because he has an understanding that China has, excuse the phrase, a trump card. And China's trump card is they control most of the rare earth minerals in the world. And so if China wants to retaliate to us in a way that would really hurt us, it's rare earth minerals. Trump knows that. And so he is playing with his other objectives to solve that problem before it becomes a problem. And so watching the interaction between these different topics and understanding kind of the master plan, I'm going, oh my. There's nobody who can touch what's happening here. You might agree with it, you might disagree with it, but it's going to happen. And so it brings back the old statement in my mind, those who fail to plan are planning failure. Trump has a plan. You might like it, you might not like it, but he has a plan, and we're now watching it unfold literally before our eyes. I can tell you pretty good what my opinion is about yesterday. I'm not so sure about my opinion about tomorrow because I'm not sure which options he's going to pursue. So really heavy, heavy, heavy stuff. And Dave, I have to give you a tip of the hat because it's you being a pain in my side, asking me questions that I don't know the answer to, that I got to go out and study. And that's resulted in me saying, oh my goodness, there is a plan here. So Dr. Tompkins keeps his head buried in supply chain. Every now and then I wake up and I become Jim again. And when I become Jim again, I said, oh my goodness, this is a leadership lesson in negotiation and accomplishing objectives. So he's got the objectives, he's got the strategies, he's got the option. Now he's pairing those with the actions, which have been pre-selected. He's just deciding when to use which one to get the best negotiated solution out of the bag. So it's really, really cool. Not only do we not know what's going to happen next, Trump doesn't know because it depends on what the adversary does, which one he's going to take. And so that's what makes this a really awesome example in leadership.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like you said, it's a masterclass in effective leadership in terms of using all of these different assets, so to speak, and all the power that the U.S. has.
Yes.
And like you said, right? It's fascinating to watch. It's interesting, and so many lessons can apply. But I'm sure many people can agree. And you hear the polls about the approval ratings being an all-time high, and clearly the election was an overwhelming landslide victory. But just seeing the transparency and just really the common sense too of what, why are we paying so much more, for the defense, right? Of like when he talks about Europe and the Ukraine situation, right? Why are we paying so much more when it's so much more important to them? And they did it as a loan where we just gave the money. And now this rare earth minerals deal looks like it's genius, right? In terms of that accomplishes an objective and to help level that category with China, potentially ends the war. It provides a level of security to Ukraine, being that we'll basically be a business partner of theirs. And the American taxpayer is going to get their money back in terms of prior it was just the money was given away, and now we're going to get that back. So that and so many other things too. When you see the transparency, when you see the common sense approach, and particularly I think business people can appreciate that because he is truly running the country like a business. And people get that, and it just makes sense. And like you said, it's fascinating to watch, and it's really interesting because we don't know where this is going to go next.
I love that, Dave, and your common sense approach. I think Trump on this list of objectives, he's got all these major objectives in the middle objective. Down on the bottom, he's got the common sense ones. And I think what he's doing is he's looking at how things are going. How are they positive, or did he have a bad day, or did some judge do this, or did some governor do this, and so forth. And so he's kind of watching how that's going. He wants to have a sense of momentum of success. So if he's looking at it and saying, today was a bad day, I need to pull something out that's going to get the people saying, yeah, that makes sense. And so that's his common sense category. So he's got these things in his common sense category. And when he's looking at the overall momentum's not going my way today, I need a shot in the arm. He looks down at his common sense things, and he goes in and he says, "Okay, here's a boy who just won a pole vault in Maine, and everyone thinks it's dumb to let boys and girls compete. I mean, boys are boys and girls are girls. They both have their own attributes. This isn't a male versus female thing. This is you don't let big guys fight with smaller girls. I mean, that doesn't make sense. Boxing in the Olympics. I mean, it's common sense. You don't let boys fight girls. You don't let boys in women's locker room. You don't let women in men's boys locker room. I mean, it doesn't make sense. So he pulls one of those out and does his thing. And then the governor from Maine shows up, and everyone in the country is saying, "Hey, he's a boy. If he wants to be a woman, that's fine. I mean, that's his choice. He can do whatever, but you can't change your if you're a man or a woman just for sport. Just go do what you want to do. Freedom of choice, but don't try to apply it on this gal that would have won the state championship. Now she's number two. That's not fair. That's not right." So he has those common sense things that he throws in there. that he knows he's not going to get 100% on anything, but on the 90-10 things, he's going to 90% support him. He said, let me throw one of my 90-10 in the fire, and it's going to feel a little better. So I think the common sense things, he kind of pulls those out. When he defined, well, there's really only two sexes. Well, we all know that. Now, are there some other issues there and so forth? Sure, they are. And those we try to understand and so forth. But from the point of view of filling out a form, I'm either a boy or a girl, and go from there. And so common sense makes a lot of sense from the point of view, and Trump using that as kind of a positive, a 90-10 issue that's going to help him on that day where maybe he didn't poll quite so well. I think that's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, yeah, and just the ability. I was just hearing this morning. I think he's answered over 1,000 questions from reporters for this first 30 some days. Just the radical transparency and the ability to, answer anything on the spot from when he doesn't know what the question is going to be. I think people appreciate that because it's real. It's not a scripted. It's not a fake politician. It's not some BS answer where I'm saying this, but something else is really going to happen, right? It's just being real, and
Yeah.
I think real people appreciate that, and it's a stark contrast to traditionally what we've seen in politics.
I love that, and Dave, we see the signing of the executive orders, and the man or the woman, he's had men do it, he's had women do it, present them with the executive order and say, "Sir, this is the executive order that has to do with this and this and this and this," and you can see Trump's mind going, and then he kind of, like, oh yeah, I got that one, and he's referring back to his objectives and his options, and he remember, oh yeah, this is option number 87F. Okay. And so now his brain goes off and he says, oh, this is a really important one because what this one is going to do is this, and this, and this. And so he's got it so controlled, but there's no way he could keep all that stuff in his mind. So he has the person tell him what it is. And then while he's signing it, he's going, oh, yeah. And then he gives a few words to the press of what this really is. And he knows because, I mean, he's the one that developed. He's worked on this for 4 years for crying out loud. He's done a dynamite job, and it's just all falling in place now. So it's very cool. Very cool.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, so let's get into this list of some of the hot topics this week. Um, so let's start with the potential privatization of the U.S. Post Office. Um, so that was announced. No one really knows necessarily what that's going to look like, but I mean, it's been public that the post office has been losing a lot of money for years now. And it sounds like he wants to minimally partner with someone in the private sector to basically have someone have some skin in the game, and then potentially turn things around and get that department, that essential service, right, for the mail operating like a profitable business. I mean that's what I see at least on the survey. I mean, what's your take on that issue?
So, Dave, I did not ask you to cover this subject. You've covered this subject. You know nothing about my background with respect to this subject. And so this is just a perfect, interesting illustration. In 1969, I was a White House fellow. I reported to President Nixon. There was 23 of us, and we spent 4 days a week outside of the White House and 1 day a week inside the White House. You and I have never discussed this. I spent 1 day a week in the post office, 1 day a week in the White House. I spent 3 days a week in the post office and 1 day a week at HUD under Secretary Romney, Milt Romney's father, who used to be the CEO of AMC, American Motors Corporation. Remember the old Rambler, okay? And so under uh, Secretary Romney on 1 day a week, 3 days at the post office. When I got to the post office, there was talking about a lot of reorganization. President Johnson had put in order a commission called the Capel Commission, and the Capel Commission was led by Mr. Capel. And what they did is they did an entire review of the post office and what should be done and how it should be reorganized. At that time, it was a full blown department of the post office, just like the Department of Commerce, the Department of Education, all the other departments. And at that time, it was a government agency. And what the Capel Commission said is we should make an independent agency so that they have a better chance to become profitable. So in 1970, the law was passed. In 1969, in the summer, I read these 4 volumes of the Capel Commission, and I developed a little simple-minded index that said this words are used on these pages and so forth. There was no index to the commission report, and my little simple index became the index that the U.S. government used. I briefed President Nixon on the creation of the independent post office. And it's that post office that is still in place today that has my friend Louis DeJoy as the Postmaster General still today. The challenge is we went from a department where we had our own budget in 1969 and before to starting in 1970 as a independent branch of the executive branch. Today's post office is not a department, it's a portion of the executive branch. What the Capel Commission said is that the President of the United States was supposed to pick the 13 governors. The 13 governors would then pick the Postmaster General. Nixon didn't like that. He wanted to pick the Postmaster General. So he picked his buddy, Red Blunt, out of Alabama to be the Postmaster General. Red Blunt didn't know postal work. He was a construction guy, but he was the first Postmaster General under the independent post office. And Red Blunt did an okay job, but it was way out over his head. But what it basically did is it allowed the post office to make its own decisions. What Trump is now talking about is privatizing it because it's now a portion of the executive branch. And if they lose money, the United States citizens are going to pay for that. But is Louis DeJoy, who's running the post office now, is he incompetent in running a place that loses money? No, he is stuck with Congress making rules. Congress says he must go to every house, every mailbox, every 5 days a week. He has to do that. And in fact, there's still the argument on the 6 day a week, but let's just say it's 5 days a week. If a guy lives out on a farm that's 5 miles from anything, we really need to carry his mail to him every day of the week? Yes, we have to. That's the law. If it's a first class piece of mail, it has to move every day. It can't sit except for on weekends. It's got to move every day. So the today, Louis DeJoy is trying to run a post office based on rules that no businessman would ever set. The businessman would say, yes, if it's in the city, we're going to service them every day. But if it's out in the boondocks, we're going to give you, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we'll deliver your mail in this county. And in this county, we're going to deliver it on Monday and Friday. And in this county, we're going to deliver it on Wednesday. And that's what you get. If you don't want that, don't use the post office, use UPS or something. And then that's going to drastically reduce the cost. The idea that Trump has is combining the census takers and the post office. That's brilliant. Why do we send a separate guy out to do the census? The postman, the mailman's there every day. In fact, the mailman probably knows half the answers to the questions before he even talks to the people. And so that makes sense. So what Trump is doing here is taking a very common sense approach. If we get it out from under the government, if the government stops putting these rules on us, the government until Louis came in 2019, until 2021, we had to prepay the retirement income. We still have to pay this ridiculous government income. So of the $7 billion we're losing today, $2.5 billion is coming from a retirement plan that's far superior to anything in industry. Why does he have to live with that? And so if we eliminate all the silly rules, now, are people that live in rural areas going to be happy about this? I don't think they're going to care because they're getting packages every day from Amazon and UPS and Federal Express, and so if mail shows up or not, I mean, we at our house, our mailbox is almost 40 feet from the house, and we some days don't go down there because there's nothing in there but junk anyway. Everything important gets delivered to the porch. I mean, as long as we can get our Amazon orders, who cares? And so what Trump is doing here is just plain common sense, and it would make it successful. Louis DeJoy is a great logistics guy. He created New Breed, which was a huge acquisition by XPO. Louis is doing very well for himself. He was doing very well. He took over as Postmaster General when Trump was in the presidency. 45 appointed Louis as the next Postmaster General. And some people said that Biden should kick him out. Biden came in and evaluated the circumstance and said, oh my goodness, he's doing a pretty good job given the job he has. And so Louis is still in there. Now, he's now turned in his paperwork that he's going to resign. And I'm sure the reason he did that is because the president told him, hey, Louis, here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to create an independent agency. And he's going to say, hey, I can't take that job because of the job I've had for the last 6 years. And so I think it's a great idea. It should be done. Privatizing is going to make sense. We'll get rid of the rules. And the post office has the volume to be a very profitable company.
Okay. Appreciate that take. All right. So next, the Canada and Mexico tariff issue. So originally, right, he announced 25% was going to take place beginning of February. He made a deal with each of them separately where they really amped up their border security, and that enacted a 30-day pause on the tariffs to allow for further negotiation. There's news stories out because Trump said the tariffs are moving forward effective March 4th. I don't know if you listened to the cabinet meeting press conference yesterday, but I believe it was in there where I think it was Howard Lutnick they were asking, and he said something to the effect of, "Listen, if these guys demonstrate a significant reduction or a significant change in what's happening at the border, maybe there's potential, but otherwise it looks like it's going forward." So again, sounds like a still kind of up in the air, unknown issue, but the official stance is that it's going forward effective March 4th. I mean, what's your take on how this is going to play out?
So this is one of the initiatives that Trump is working with. Hey, Mexico and Canada are our friends. They have been our friends for a long time. We share huge borders with each of them. We want Mexico and Canada to continue to be our friends going forward. At the same point, Trump has a lot of battles around the world. And these battles around the world are going to require people to be somewhat afraid of him. And if Trump starts caving in on the friends, they're going to start saying, well, maybe he'll cave in on us. And so this is a test of Trump's will versus what the world is seeing of him. Um, do we have a negative balance of trade with Mexico and Canada? Yes. Is that a problem we want to resolve? Yes. Do we also have open borders problems? Yes. Do we also have a fentanyl problem? Yes. Now, fentanyl has much more Mexico problem than Canada, but it's a problem at each. And so what Trump said, he's going to put these tariffs on. And then they both came back and said, we're going to put money, we're going to put helicopters, we're going to put troops, we're going to take care of the borders, we're going to close the borders. And if you do that, we'll delay this for a month. So he's done that. Now, does can I answer the question? Can Ludwig answer the question? The Secretary of Department of Commerce. Can Trump answer the question? No. Why? No one knows yet. It depends what happens in the next couple of days. What was said, the guy that's in charge of the Canada Mexico tariffs went to Trump and said, hey, here's where we are. What do you want to do? And Trump says, well, I think we got to apply some more pressure. They said, okay, where should we apply pressure? They said, well, the biggest event we have is first cabinet meeting. So let's in the cabinet meeting, let's actually have a discussion about it. And let's have someone other than me say, yeah, it looks like it's the fourth unless something happens. And then we'll say that, and then we'll watch what happens. So now they're sitting back watching what Mexico and Canada is doing, and they're going to see what happens. I personally think that anyone who makes a guess on what Trump is going to do is open to make a mistake. I think that you're susceptible to make a mistake because it's not predictable based on what we're looking at. It bases on the bigger picture. I do believe Trump's doing pretty well. I do believe he's going to continue to do well. So I personally think it's going to get delayed. But I think there's a high likelihood that I'm wrong based on something happens on the night of the 3rd at the border that might change that whole story and it might go the other way. In the long run, Trump doesn't want to punish Mexico and Canada. What he wants to do is make America great. That doesn't mean he wants to make Mexico and Canada, our closest friends, terrible. That's not his goal. That's not what he's trying to accomplish. And so if this is in a bigger picture of things, it might go in, it might not go in. In the long term, we're not going to have to deal with those tariffs. And in fact, let's say the tariff does go in. The tariff goes in, but then he excludes, well, I'm going to exclude this because it would do undue harm to your economy. So if he's looking at Canada, maybe he says, well, the tariff says everything, but what we're going to do is we're going to extract automotive out because our automotive industry really needs us working together. So I will take this portion out. And he looks at Mexico and he says, yes, Mexico is a real problem, but what we're going to do is we're going to remove these tariffs on agricultural type goods. And we're going to already reduce the cost of the tariff on the energy from Canada. And so we're going to adjust them so you don't know. And then what happens is you have one issue that goes in a different direction. So let's say that Mexican company, instead of manufacturing in Mexico, because this potential tariff, they decide to manufacture in Texas. Well, that's a win. And that's a good thing for Mexicans, a good thing for Americans. And so Trump's going to want some of that to happen. So very, very clear to me. I don't know.
Okay, and just as long as we're talking about Canada, this idea of Canada becoming the 51st U.S. state has really picked up some momentum. And, was talking about the other day too, a reporter brought up to Trump about there's a movement within Canada where the people really support this. And he expanded on that in terms of they're going to pay less taxes, they're going to have true protection. And really, I mean, he's broken down this issue numerous times, just in a common sense way of like, listen, we don't need them. They need us. Why should we be subsidizing them? Why should we be defending them for free? And it's putting in a way that anyone can understand in terms of if someone you have a relationship with if your next door neighbor is taking advantage of you in a way that's not fair, why wouldn't you want them to pay their own way and support themselves and treat you in a fair and reciprocal way. So I think people can get behind that concept. But just in terms of that actually happening, Canada becoming a state, I mean, what do you see happening there?
I don't think Canada will become the 51st state. I think the Canadians have a lot of pride in Canada. They have a pride in being a ex-subject of the UK. They still honor the Queen in a very delightful way. They did win the hockey game, and so there's obviously a lot of sentiment for that. Um, I respect the Canadians tremendously, and I think it's a good business decision for them to become the 51st state. There's all the things that Trump lists out make a lot of sense, but that doesn't mean those things will happen. And I don't think Canada would take a referendum and make that decision. Um, I think what's really important there is that we work on the balance of trade. We work on the unfair trade advantages where they exist, and we continue to work together for a united Western Hemisphere front. I would like to see Greenland included. I would like to see us help Canada with investment to mine their rare minerals. Their rare minerals are not easily obtained because it's so darn cold there. Um, I think there's a lot to be gained by us continuing as separate countries, but countries that are united with one objective of free trade, free enterprise, and doing fair trade. And I think that is where we're probably going to wind up.
Okay. All right, so next, it was announced, Apple announced they're making a $500 billion investment, starting with a new plant in Texas, and then there were several other locations named, and a lot of new jobs, new U.S. jobs will be created within the next 4 years, and yeah, they're going to open a new server factory in Houston in 2026. So yeah, Trump had teased this deal out for several days, and then Apple officially announced it a few days ago. So what's your take on that?
Well, I think it's interesting how good the press is on some issues and how poor they are on other issues. In 2018, Apple committed an investment of $350 million to invest in the United States, and that would create 20,000 jobs. Um, in 2021, when Trump put the tariff on China, Apple, which all their uh, Apple products were made in China, uh, was really in a bad way. And Tim Cook went to President Trump, President 45, and said, "Hey, this is killing me." And Trump said, "Why?" He said, "Because Samsung up in South Korea don't have to pay tax, and so the 25% tax, and so it's going to really, really kill our sales." And Trump said, "Oh, well, I'll tell you what, I'll excuse you from the 25% tax. iPhone products will come into the U.S. with no tariff whatsoever. But in return, I'd like you to do me a favor." And he says, "Yeah, what's that?" He said, "I would like you to invest in factories in the United States and research centers in the United States." Apple said, "That's really a fair idea. We've already committed 350 billion. We will up that to 430 billion." So in 2021, Apple uh, uh, did an announcement of 430 billion to create 20,000 new jobs. Now, at the time, they were asked the question, is this in addition to the 350 and the other 20,000 jobs, or is this all inclusive? I said, no, this is all inclusive. This is the same plan, but we're upping it by 80 million. And so now in 2025, Apple comes along, sees that they have two factories underway in Mexico. Trump's not happy about that. Trump calls them and said, "Hey, remember you said at 500 billion you're going to do." And so Tim Cook showed up and said, "Yes, we will up our 430 to 500 billion." Now, they're referring to the 500 billion because that's what they've committed. But of that, 350 was committed in 18, 80 of it was committed in 21. And now what we're seeing is an additional 70 billion. And it's going to create 20,000 new jobs. So it's the same 20,000. This isn't 20 plus 20 with 20. This is 20,000 new jobs. So it's changed up a little bit. I think the thing that's very encouraging, what's changed up, is what Trump asked for in 21 and what Trump got in 25 is different. What Trump asked for in 21 was factories. What he's got in 25, although Apple hasn't fully disclosed it, except on if you happen to be an Apple stockholder, Apple is now going to be using a lot of that 500 billion and those 20,000 jobs for higher level jobs. This isn't going to be manufacturing jobs. This is going to be research and development and AI oriented. And that's what they're going to be spending the new money on. And so I think it's great that Trump has this plan for investment. That's another one of the strategies is to make America great again, is to have great jobs, well-paying jobs, and for us to do manufacturing here when it's economically sound. I think it's a great idea. It's a great objective. And I think this is consistent with that objective. And I think Trump and Apple are doing a great job.
Okay. Yeah, and to that point too, right? Just sidebar here. I was listening to Rubio the other day, was being interviewed and just talking about all the different things he's doing and the tour he's been on with all these different nations. But he made several references to vulnerabilities in manufacturing, in terms of shipbuilding and a variety of different things. And he just, he said not only for national security purposes and economic purposes and whatnot, that we need to truly be not so reliant on foreign manufacturers, because clearly that trend has happened over the last over a long period of time, where a lot of factories have outsourced, jobs have outsourced, and whatnot. So there's this return to being a manufacturing center. So, and with the reciprocal tariffs, I guess at this point slated to begin taking place on April 2nd, it's about a little over a month away. I mean, how much more return to U.S. manufacturing do you think we'll see announced in the coming weeks prior to that because of this reciprocal tariff rule that's going into effect?
Well, I think the reality is rather than quote return. I like the way you word that question because that's the way that the politicians are wanting returning to America. Um, Return means to come back. Okay, now the challenge is what the factory what those things used to be made in has now been turned into condominiums. So the space isn't available. The people that used to work in those factories have either retired, died, or they went on and got some more education and now working at a higher level job. They don't. The people don't want to go back to the job they did 30 years ago. The building's not available to go back to, and in fact, you can't even afford to buy a condo in that building, let alone buy the building for manufacturing. So nothing is going to quote come back. Are there some manufacturing that could be done better in the United States from a friendshoring point of view? of critical military, electronics products, pharmaceutical, medical products that should be made here for the well-being and the security of the country? Absolutely. Should we make those? Yes. Should we apply our knowledge on automation and robotics to get those done with fewer and fewer people? Yes. So we do want manufacturing to be done in America, but it's not necessarily returning. It's just coming back in a different form totally. Because if you would bring it back and do it like it was done, you'd go out of business because you couldn't make any money. With or without tariffs, you're not going to be productive. You're not going to be competitive because an American worker is not going to work for $7 an hour like Mexico, not going to work for $4 an hour like in the Dominican Republic. And so we got to have a reality check here of should we bring it back to our hemisphere? Yeah, good idea. Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, Panama, Mexico, they're all close by, Canada. And maybe we should do more things there and build up the Western Hemisphere. So I think it's great to make America great again. I think to make American friends great again is also a good idea.
Okay. All right, and that kind of segues into another topic too with the article that I saw, and it says mass deportations could disrupt U.S. food supply chain, experts say. So I didn't know what to make of that, and clearly you have a lot of expertise in this area. But what's your thought on? I mean, the article basically is saying that so many of the jobs in terms of for food, are being done by people that could potentially be deported. So if this plan goes through, that you're not going to have people to work, and that could potentially lead to a food shortage. I mean, how real of an issue is that?
That's a very real issue. Um, when you have, if you want to shut down your harvesting of crop, just show up with four ice trucks on at the entrance to the farm. A lot of your uh, people that are harvesting crops come north for harvest, and they are illegals. And if they would be deported or not, if they're criminals or not, that's a topic beyond my expertise. But it takes a lot of manual labor that's needed for a short harvest season. You don't harvest when you want to, you harvest when God says to. God says the field is ripe, the product is ripe, go get it. And you got a couple days to go out there and get that stuff. And if you don't get it quickly, you're going to wind up with the vitamin content of the fruit or the vegetable going down, the product spoiling, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you need a bunch of bodies when you need them, and you can't pay a lot of money. So migrant workers are a huge source of productivity for harvesting the product as well as then food processing, because the food processing is done when the product is ripe. And sure, there's some product that you can condense and put in the freezer and let it sit there for 3 months before you process it. But a lot of them, to capture the value of the fruit or the vegetable, you need to process it now. So if we deport lots of folks and we don't have a equivalent kind of a way of expanding our legal visa program, we're going to have a problem. But if we have an expanded visa program where we can bring in an equivalent number of folks that we kick out, but then we tell them, okay, you can stay here for 2 months and then you have to go home. And so they come in, they go to Southern California, they start picking there, and then they move north, and then they go back to Mexico, and that works out fine. It's great for them. It's how they built their life. There's people in Mexico that all they do is work 3 months a year picking crop. It's hard work. They work very hard. They don't have a great living, but it works out okay for them. But if we're closing the borders and not letting them come back in, and we're deporting the ones that are already here, we will have a problem. And we're not going to find people going from Detroit or from Raleigh, where you live and I live, to go out and pick crops, and not going to happen.
Okay. All right. So TBD, to be determined what's going to happen there for sure. And brings up another, talking about visa and immigration, legal immigration, brings up another topic, a very hot topic from this past week, where Trump announced the gold card, which is a transformation, I guess, of the EB5 program. And I mean, so sounds like a fascinating idea, and essentially it's allowing people of wealth or companies to provide to purchase. I guess a path to citizenship for so companies could purchase it for outstanding young students, and they give several examples of how people at the top of their class weren't able to stay in the country, or people of wealth from other countries that could potentially buy their path to citizenship and then come in and take advantage of the quote American dream and open up business here and create a lot of jobs, and a lot of high level people that could afford to do that would be a good thing. And then obviously the proceeds from that program would go to pay down the national debt. So I mean, what's your overall take on that idea?
I think it's absolutely brilliant. We got people that want in. We have barriers to them coming in. There's what 250,000 people on the list to have the means to pay the $5 million, and they really want to pay it and come to America, and we won't process it. Um, to me, that's hello, bureaucrats in Washington D.C. work on this. This is something. I mean, how much does it cost us to expedite those things? $10,000, and so we have a income of 5 million and a cost of 10,000. Can I afford to do this program? I think so. I mean, I think if they would give it and say Dave and Jim have owned this program, the D&J business are going to do pretty well because we can get that applications done and we can do all the background checks and make sure it's done totally correctly. We could create a program for maintaining contact with those people. We can, audit them every 6 months. And Dave and Jim Incorporated can do that for $10,000 a piece, and we get paid 5 million. Yeah, let's tee it up. Let's go. I'm ready.
Okay. Yeah, so that's apparently from what they said that the sale of those could start within about 2 weeks or so. So we're going to find out pretty quickly how that's going to go. But they seem very bullish on the amount of these gold cards that they could sell. So certainly an exciting idea. And yeah, like you said, didn't see this coming, but yeah, face value sounds brilliant and something that could certainly benefit everyone.
Right on.
Okay. All right. So we've covered a bunch here, Jim. And as we always say, too, right? If you're affected within supply chain by any one of these topics we've gone over, or anything else regarding tariffs, regarding the all the moving parts that we see right now, and people need expert guidance. People need someone with experience that understands these complex issues and how to help navigate a particular a company through them. Um, your company, Tompkins Ventures, has a wealth of intelligent people that you're connected with. You're a premier B2B matchmaking firm in all things logistics, from consulting, technology, finance, uh, logistic solutions, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, just speak to those people in terms of if they are looking for help and they need an expert to assist them in this challenging time, the type of guidance that your company offers.
Well, I appreciate that opportunity, Dave. There's three types of consulting firms. There's consulting firms that are very broad, but not very deep. Not a lot of help unless you want to talk about general market strategy or something, but not gives a lot of value. Then there's companies that are very deep, but narrow. That was my firm. For 45 years, I ran a company called Tompkins International. It was a very good firm, and we were really good at warehousing and distribution. However, if when we would come in, we would ask the client, "What is your thinking on inventory?" And they say, "Well, we're going to go from 6 inventory turns to 8 turns." I said, "Okay." I said, "What is your thinking on customer satisfaction?" They say, "Well, we believe 2 or 3 day delivery is going to be adequate." We say, "Okay." So then what we would do is we would take those two assumptions and we would do our deep, knowledgeable thing at Tompkins International and design them the best warehouse, the best transportation network, the best distribution network, the been known to mankind. And it was marvelous. But then 6 months later, I get a call from the guy. And the guy says, Jim, you built the warehouse too small. I said, oh my goodness, let me come and look, spend some time with you. So I go and spend time. Well, I said, wait a minute, guys, you're not turning inventory 6 times. You're not turning inventory 8 times like you said. You're still at 6 turns. He said, yeah, that program didn't work out. I said, well, we designed the warehouse for 8 turns. And if you're only turning it 6 times, your warehouse is going to be too small. That was a critical assumption we all agreed on. And the guy said, yeah, and we're not really doing well with the customer because we were doing the customer 2 to 3 days. And now what we find our customer really want 1 to 2 days. We said, that was the other assumption we made. And you did. So what happens is when you're very deep but narrow, you have some real challenges. Then there's the third type of firm, which is very broad and very deep. They've got everything. The McKinseys, the Accentures, the IBMs, people have everything. It's unbelievable the work they can do. The problem is they have everything. And so they've got all these expensive people on this very high payroll and there's very beautiful offices all over the place. And so what they have done is they've outrun their value prop. Their cost is so high. So the broad and not very deep is no good. The very deep but narrow isn't very good. And the broad and deep is not very good. So how do you get answers? Well, the answers is to put together a firm that's not a company, but instead is an ecosystem. And in that ecosystem, you have all these things involved. And so you have some firms that are very good on strategy. You have some firms that are very good on transportation, some good on inventory, some on technology, some on procurement. You put all these different firms together. And then when a client comes to us with a problem, what we do is we play matchmaker. And we say, oh, okay, the recipe for success here is one of these and one of these and one of these. This is your team. Let's go to work. And so what we don't have is the overhead of the broad and deep, but we have the capability of the broad and deep by putting together the segments we need. And that's why Tompkins Ventures is a matchmaker firm that has in it commercial partners, 3PLs, transportation companies, construction companies, technology companies, capital partners, people who want to invest money, and consulting partners that can design and solve problems. And so that gives the client the best of the best. And that's where we really try to go and help clients. So our objective is to help clients be more successful. And we put together the proper team to make that happen. And the team is a portion of the Tompkins Ventures ecosystem.
Okay, and if people want to get more info, where can they go to find that?
The best place is go to the website. The website is tompkinsventures.com and TOMPKINSVENTURES.com.
Okay, excellent. All right. Well, Jim, as always, it's been a pleasure. Appreciate your knowledge and your wisdom on all these different topics, and we will speak again soon.
Super, Dave. Thanks so much.